If you're looking for PTCG live codes, make sure you check out the Potown store. You can get a 5% discount on your orders using that code OmniPoke. For today's video, we're going to be going over the results of the Lille Regional Championships over the weekend. It was a 1,311 player tournament, of course, in this Stellar Crown format. Some pretty interesting decks to go over as well, but let's kick things off with the day one meta breakdown, where we see Raging Bolt as the most popular archetype at 15%. Then we have a couple 10%ers in Lugia and Charizard, followed up by Palkia plus Dusknoir, Regidrago and Dragapult, all with that similar 8% to make our top 6 lists. For the best of the rest, Terrapagos was just a little bit shy of making that day one, but still at that 7% threshold. Then we have Gardevoir, a smorgasbord of other archetypes, 3% on that Lost Zone box, which did get a second place finish over in Louisville. And then we have the lightning stuff, the aggressive approach with Miraidon and the defensive and disruptive approach from Iron Thorns, both at 3% respectively. We actually have a massive shake-up from day 1 to day 2 here. Raging Bolt goes from the most to the 6th best placing, whereas Lugia creeps up, Charizard remains about the same. Regidrago also had a pretty good day at the office, but Snorlax Control coming out of nowhere, wasn't even on the best of the rest graphic of day 1, shooting up to 10 of them in day 2 of the tournament, as well as a handful of Gardevoir EX players in the mix as well. So even though Raging Bolt slid down, it still hung on to the graphic. The Dragapult and the Palkia variants did slip off. As we can see in the best of the rest, Terrapagos again like holding strong. The Dragapult only mildly losing out, but the Palkia had a really poor showing overall. Lost Zone box doing okay, the Iron Thorns hanging on, and Gholdengo creeping into the graphic as well. It's Europe after all. So congratulations to James Cox on his winning list, his first regional win actually. Surprising for a player as strong as him, but there you go. Actually a lot of pilots of this list as well. As you can see, lots of them over in Lille, including the junior winning list, as well as a bunch of very strong pilots over in Louisville and Dortmund as well. So people have just been rocking this 1-1 knocked out package in Drago, and it seems to be here to stay, just cherry picking those crucial cards, protecting your legacy star for late game checkmates. Or vice versa, if you're forced to Legacy Star, you can have the Jewel Seeker for late game powerful plays as well. And I think especially after the results in Louisville, the Jamming Tower makes complete sense here to weave into the 60 to disrupt those Bravery Charms from the Raging Bolt players. Pretty much a mandatory inclusion going forward, I would say. So with so many very, very strong pilots rocking this exact 60 and making no changes, it's pretty clear to see that this is the way to play Regidrago now. Clement Courbois, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, got second place with Dragapult Pidgeot, a very different 60 to the one that we saw win over in Dortmund because it's favouring Pidgeot and Radiant Alakazam and Hawlucha over playing the very thick Dusknoir package. Definitely less explosive options for the 60, but you do have Quick Search at your side to make sure that you're still constructing those really powerful turns. I think the key standout here is the 3 copies of Countercatcher. It's clear this deck is comfortable sitting from behind and taking multiple prize knockouts towards the end game with that Phantom Dive setup, with all this damage counter placement in the 60. It's not the first time, but it's also great to see the league headquarters getting a mention in the Dragapult list as well. I think it's obvious that you had to respect Raging Bolt after getting a win in the previous weekend, and this is one way that you can try and make life more difficult for those Raging Bolt players to get those back-to-back knockouts against you. Snorlax made it to top 4, does have the Diancie in the 60, an attacking threat that you can use against the Lugia matchup. There's actually respect being given to Lugia overall with the Giacomo supporter also in the list. Also really interesting to see Prime Catcher as the choice of A-Spec over having the very typical Hero's Cape. It does allow you to cheat some space rather than having Switch Cut in the 60, and I suppose it does allow you to trap things from the get-go, which is becoming increasingly important because there are a number of decks using that Dusknoir to stay on even prize cards against the opponent, trying to shut you down from Countercatcher for longer periods of the game. I think the second copy of Boss and the Prime Catcher inclusion is a clear indication that you want to continually keep that block available to you, even when your opponent has that Dusknoir package in the list. Regidrago overall having a great time in our top 8. We have Alberto Conti with a sort of traditional engine here with no Noctowl in the 60, instead having that Penny include, as well as just that extra copy of Earthen Vessel. And then Kaiwin playing the same 60 as James, which is again just reinforcing the strength of the exact 60 that we've just seen. Lugia also having that great day 1 to day 2 conversion, but also having a couple placements here in top 8. Joshua Van Overshelder bringing the 3-3 Chinchino and the 4 Great Ball 60 to the table. He has played Lugia for a decent amount of time. I think the double Jamming Tower was a great swap, seeing the recent Louisville results. And it goes to show that just playing the traditional way of Lugia is still very viable right now. Ethan Wild also improving on his result over in Dortmund that day 2, now bringing back the same 60 to that top 8 finish. Has the very quirky 1-2 line of Chinchino, but does have the Thornton, bear in mind, so there are ways to actually use Special Roll 2 times in a game. Also has the Wellspring Ogerpon EX, which you've actually seen him on stream use Torrential Pump to great effect, so retaining a spot in his 60 here. There was still a Raging Bolt that did make top 8, and it's a quad Bravery Charm build once again. Couple interesting counts, just the 2 Pokestop with the 4 Trekking Shoes. I actually prefer the ratio split the other way around and going 3-3 here. Also trimming the Pokegear down to 2 without adding in the Luminion that Caleb chose to play. Clearly you are still making spaces for those Bravery Charms, but I do prefer ratios in a different way, like the Retrieval 5 count of Grass we saw from Caleb was great. If you're not playing Fish, you probably have to play the 3 gear, and ultimately Shoot isn't as impactful as just having Pokestop in play, I think. So I'd like to see a few different counts shimmied around. But that being said, it's just another great result for Raging Bolt. Gardevoir Burnett once again made it into the top 16, same as last time. The exact same 60 as the Polish players, so seems to be replicatable success for this list. I know we've already talked about Snorlax once, but this is Sander's approach where you go Rotomless. And as you can see, there are a wild amount of different supporters that you don't typically see in Snorlax here. You got Chorus Experiment, Choi, and Worker in here for draw. There's even the Grusher in the deck. When have you last read this card, be honest? You can draw until you have 7, yeah, that's busted. You've got some extra draw from good old Lucky Helmet. You've got Boxed Order in here as well. Rather than getting a random 3-card dig, you can use the Boxed Order and end your turn grabbing 2 items from the deck specifically for what you want. As per usual, Sander's been kind enough to do a long post on Twitter about his reasoning why he's going Rotom V-less, essentially just make the prize map harder, right? There are, of course, risks to taking this approach. But as we know, Sander makes engines work one way or another and still has as much disruption in the list as humanly possible. So really impressive result from him. I'll be honest, I really don't want to face this sort of 60 of Snorlax, because very often decks are factoring in the fact that they can boss a Rotom for a bit of freedom of retreat, as well as taking 2 easy prizes against this deck. So having a truly hard 6 prize map could be the difference between winning and losing against Snorlax for a number of these archetypes that have some options, but not quite enough. Yeah, you can see how Sander went far with a 60. We also have Rogue Deck Extraordinaire Luke Kirkham in top 16 with his Gouging Fire EX deck. He's played this to a huge number of cups. I know him very well from the UK, and he's also played this in Dortmund as well to a day 2 finish. I think his recent tweak was adding in Kieran to the 60 to give you more damage outputs. Alongside Monkey Dory, it means Gouging Fire can actually KO things like Dragapult EX, which has been upticking. Thanks to Sada, Base, and E-Switch, you can burst things like Entei V and Delphox V onto the board, essentially out of nowhere, so these attackers can come in really handy. Delphox having that powerful sniping attack that many archetypes might not prepare for when they start seeing Gouging Fire in the opening stages, and Gouging Fire being a very effective racing archetype in its own right. Comparing it to Raging Bolt, it obviously doesn't have that same reach, but against a number of matchups, you have that 260, which is still fantastic. You have Monkey Dory to help push for the V-Stars at the very least. You have that setup damage from Delphox. Yeah, there's so much going on with this 60. It's difficult to play against, and it also puts your opponent in awkward positions. Even though there's just the 1 copy of the Judge, you do have Luminion and Secret Box that can both try and sort of help you get towards it when you need to. It puts a lot of setup decks on the back foot, obviously very good against Terrapagos, which is just used on Fan Rotom, and this deck is great at applying pressure whilst using Judge at the same time. You also have the Quad Jet Energy in the 60, making you really, really good against the controlling matchups as well. You're almost cosplaying as Lugia in that matchup. Gouging Fire being able to get through the Cornerstones very effectively. The Baby Moltres can help you get through Mimikyus, and Fluttermane can also do that to an extent as well. Yeah, I'm sure Luke has a few more considerations about the 60 that I'm not mentioning right now, but he's been ironing this one out for months, so I think he's got everything to a place where he's quite happy with the 60. The highest placing Charizard was in top 32, and once again choosing to play that maximum belt, very similar to what we saw over in Louisville, to a top 16 placement, giving Charizard that more aggressive dimension that doesn't force you to have a Curse Blast play. Interesting to see a sort of higher tempo Charizard getting back into vogue. Nico was the highest placing Terrapagos pilot, and once again we see the Bouffalance coming back into the 60. Nico choosing to play the Churro, the Penny, and the Thornton in the list, including that Palpad as well. Lots of ways to get around the controlling matchups and have healing against some decks trying to set up damage against you, like Dragapult. You do have to make some concessions to weave the Bouffalon into the 60, like having trimmed counts of both the Dusknoir and the Noctowl line. But as we know, there are so many archetypes right now punishing the fact that this deck plays no Mana Fee that the double Curly Wall might be the right way to go. There was a good old Turbo Roaring Moon deck as well, once again making it into top 32. Similar to the Gouging Fire, this is just a very good aggressive Judge archetype. If you can dig aggressively early enough with your Squawkabilly and Shoes and whatnot, finding those dark patches, getting an attack in with a judge is just absolutely crazy right now. We see the enhanced hammer coming into the 60 once again, just to respect the mist energy for both Lugia players and control. There's even the emergency jelly in the 60, which I think is a nod towards Dragapult trying to stay out of range post gouging. A Lost Box did squeak it through to make top 32 as well. I think Raikou V was the only introduction from the Louisville 60. Otherwise, sticking to that sort of very high item Pokestop formula that it's been known for recently. So just a couple weekends now until Gdansk. There's also Buenos Aires the following weekend, and then we have the LAIC, so still plenty more tournaments to come. As you may have seen, we've started to look towards the Surging Spark stuff, but we are still going to be bouncing between the two for another couple of weeks. Let me know what your thoughts of all the decks. What was your favourite this weekend? What archetype are you going to be testing in the run-up to some of these events? I'll hear it all down below. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for another video. Cheers.